I stood in the courthouse hallway, my hands still shaking from signing the papers. 23 years old, and I'd just done something I never thought I'd have the courage to do. My phone buzzed. It was him, my father. "You ungrateful—" I hung up before he could finish. Because for the first time in my life, I didn't owe him an explanation. I didn't owe him my silence, and I certainly didn't owe him my forgiveness. You want to know how I got here? How a girl who once believed family was everything ended up cutting ties with the man who gave her life. Let me take you back. Back to when I was 19. Back to the day my father sold me. Not to strangers. Not to traffickers. To his own brother. My name is Maya. I grew up in a small community where tradition wasn't just respected, it was law, the kind of place where everyone knew everyone, where reputations were built over generations, and where a daughter's obedience was considered the highest virtue. I was the youngest of 3 children. My older brothers, Rahul and Amit, were the golden ones. They got educations, careers, freedom. I got rules. Don't speak too loudly. Don't laugh too much. Don't question. Don't dream too big. My mother died when I was 12. Cancer, they said. But I think it was something else. I think it was the slow suffocation of a life unlived. I watched her fade, watched her swallow her words, watched her defer to my father on everything from what to cook for dinner to whether she could visit her own sister. After she died, I became the woman of the house. At 12, I cooked, I cleaned. I managed the household while my father worked and my brothers studied. And I told myself it was temporary, that once I turned 18, I'd go to college. I'd become a teacher, maybe, or a nurse, something that mattered. I had notebooks filled with plans, scholarship applications, dreams written in purple ink. My father found them one day. He didn't yell. He just looked at me with this disappointment, like I'd betrayed him by wanting more. Education makes girls difficult, he said, closing the notebook. You don't need college to be a good wife. I should have seen it coming then, but I was still naive, still believed that if I was good enough, obedient enough, he'd see me as more than just a bargaining chip. It was 3 months after my 19th birthday when Uncle Vikram came to visit. Uncle Vikram was my father's older brother, 62 years old, a widower with grown children older than me. He lived 2 hours away in the city, in a house that smelled like old tobacco and loneliness. I'd met him maybe 5 times in my life. He was always polite, always formal, the kind of man who spoke in measured tones and expected immediate deference. That evening, I served tea in the living room, as I always did when guests came. I noticed they were speaking in low voices, but I didn't think much of it. Business, probably. My father and uncle had some joint property. Somewhere! I went back to the kitchen to prepare dinner. My father called me back an hour later. His voice had that edge to it, the one that meant I needed to be on my best behavior. I walked into the living room, wiping my hands on my apron. Both men looked at me, really looked at me, and I felt suddenly exposed, like they were evaluating me, assessing me. Sit down, Maya, my father said. I sat on the edge of the sofa, hands folded in my lap, eyes down. Perfect posture, perfect obedience. Your uncle has made a very generous offer, my father began. His voice was warm, almost excited. He's asked for your hand in marriage. The words didn't register at first. Marriage. Uncle Vikram. Those two concepts didn't connect in my brain. I looked up, certain I'd misheard. I don't understand. It's a great honor, my father continued, as if I hadn't spoken. Your uncle is a respected man, well off. You'll want for nothing. But I stopped myself. He's your brother. He's 43 years older than me. He's old enough to be my grandfather. He's family, my father finished for me, as if that explained everything. This will strengthen our family bonds, and he's offered to help with your brother's business ventures. It's a good match, Maya. A good match. I looked at Uncle Vikram. He was watching me with those pale, calculating eyes. He didn't smile, didn't try to reassure me. He just waited. I don't want to get married yet, I said quietly. My heart was pounding so hard I could hear it in my ears. I want to study. What you want is irrelevant. My father's voice had gone cold. This is already decided. The engagement will be announced next week. No. The word came out before I could stop it. No, I won't. The slap came so fast I didn't see it coming. My cheek exploded in pain, and I tasted blood where my teeth had cut the inside of my mouth. You will do as you're told, my father said, his voice deadly quiet. Or you can leave this house with nothing. No family, no money, no reputation. Do you understand? I understood. I understood perfectly. I was trapped. The engagement party was a nightmare dressed up as a celebration. Aunties I barely knew pinched my cheeks and told me how lucky I was, how blessed. Distant cousins whispered behind their hands, their eyes full of pity they'd never voice aloud. Uncle Vikram, I was supposed to call him by his first name now, supposed to drop the uncle, but I couldn't, sat beside me like a monument. He placed his hand on my knee once during the evening, a gesture meant to be affectionate. It felt like ownership. I smiled through it all. I'd learned how to smile with my face while dying inside. It's a skill many women master early. The wedding was set for 6 months away. 6 months to prepare, they said. 6 months to get to know each other. What they meant was 6 months for me to accept my fate. Uncle Vikram visited every week. He'd sit in our living room and talk with my father about politics, about business, about everything except me. Occasionally, he'd ask me questions. How was I spending my time? What was I cooking? Had I started on the wedding preparations? I answered in monosyllables, yes, no, fine. He never asked what I wanted, what I felt, if I was afraid. Because it didn't matter. I wasn't a person to him. I was an acquisition, something he'd negotiated for and won. My father was different around him now, lighter, more relaxed. They'd started a new business together. Some investment property deal I didn't understand. My father bought a new car, upgraded his phone, started talking about expanding the house. Blood money, I thought every time I saw him flash his new watch. The price of his daughter's life. I tried to reach out to my brothers. Surely they'd help. Surely they'd see how wrong this was. Rahul shrugged it off. It's not ideal, but father knows best. Uncle Vikram will take care of you. Amit was more blunt. Don't be dramatic, Maya. Arranged marriages have worked for generations. You'll adjust. Adjust. As if I was a piece of furniture that needed to fit in a new room. I had no allies, no escape routes, no money of my own. Every attempt to find work was blocked by my father. Every application I submitted was mysteriously never received. He'd cut off every avenue before I even knew they existed. I was 19 years old, and my life was over before it had begun. The wedding was lavish. My father spared no expense, though, of course, Uncle Vikram paid for most of it. I wore red and gold, as tradition demanded. My hands were painted with intricate henna. Jewelry I'd never wanted hung heavy on my neck, my ears, my wrists. I looked like a bride. I felt like a sacrifice. The ceremony blurred together, prayers I didn't hear, rituals I performed mechanically. I circled the sacred fire 7 times, each rotation another chain locking into place. When it was done, I was Mrs. Vikram Sharma. I was also no longer Maya, just his wife. Uncle Vikram, I still couldn't think of him as just Vikram, as my husband, took me to his house that night. The house that would now be my prison. It was large, cold, and filled with the belongings of his first wife. Her photos still on the walls, her clothes still in the closet, her presence haunting every room. I haven't had the heart to pack her things away, he told me, as if this was romantic rather than disturbing, but you can do whatever you like with them. Permission to erase another woman's existence. How generous. That first night, I locked myself in the bathroom and cried until I had no tears left. Then I washed my face, fixed my makeup, and walked out with a smile. Survival mode had kicked in. The first year was the hardest. Not because Uncle Vikram was physically violent. He wasn't. Not because he was cruel in obvious ways. He was in fact painfully polite, always asking if I needed anything, always ensuring I was comfortable. But comfort isn't freedom. The house had rules. Unspoken but absolute. I was to wake up before him and have breakfast ready. I was to keep the house spotless. I was to dress modestly, his definition of modest, which meant covering everything from neck to ankle. I was to be available when he wanted company and invisible when he didn't. I was to call my father every Sunday and tell him how happy I was. That was perhaps the cruelest rule of all, the mandatory performance of contentment. "How is married life?" my father would ask, his voice warm with satisfaction. "Fine," I'd say. "Everything is fine." And Uncle Vikram would sit across from me, watching, ensuring I played my part. The age gap was impossible to ignore. His friends were all elderly men who treated me like a curiosity, a trophy their friend had acquired. Their wives were kind but distant, clearly uncomfortable with the situation, but too polite to say anything. I had nothing in common with him. He'd lived a full life, career, children, grandchildren. He talked about his past constantly, about his achievements, about his late wife, whom he'd apparently loved deeply, which made my presence even more confusing. I was expected to listen, to nod, to be impressed, to have no stories of my own because I'd lived no life of my own. The isolation was crushing. I'd gone from my father's house to my husband's house without ever existing independently. I was always someone's daughter, someone's wife, never just me. Uncle Vikram would occasionally try to be affectionate, a hand on my shoulder, a kiss on my forehead, gestures that made my skin crawl because I didn't want them, had never wanted them, but had no right to refuse. I learned to dissociate, to be physically present while mentally elsewhere. It's a skill many women in unhappy marriages master. At night, I'd lie awake and count the years until I'd be old enough that people might finally listen to me. 30, 40. How long did I have to perform this role before I earned the right to my own life? 2 years into the marriage, Uncle Vikram's daughter, Priya, came to visit. Priya was 36, married with 2 teenagers. She'd always been polite but distant with me, clearly uncomfortable with her father, remarrying someone younger than her. But this visit was different. She'd come alone, without her husband or kids, and within an hour of arriving, I could tell something was wrong. We were in the kitchen. I was preparing lunch while she sat at the table, and for the first time, we actually talked. Really talked. "How are you doing?" she asked. Really. The question surprised me. No one ever asked me that. Not really. "I'm fine," I said automatically. "Maya." She said my name gently. "You don't have to pretend with me." Something in her voice cracked my carefully constructed walls. Maybe it was the exhaustion. Maybe it was the fact that she was the first person in 2 years who'd actually seen me. But I started crying. Not delicate tears, ugly, gasping sobs that I'd been holding back for so long. Priya stood up and wrapped her arms around me. She didn't tell me to stop, didn't tell me everything would be okay. She just held me while I fell apart. When I finally caught my breath, she made us both tea and sat down across from me. "I need to tell you something," she said, "and you might hate me for not saying it sooner." She told me that she'd opposed the marriage from the beginning, that she'd argued with her father, told him it was wrong, that I was too young. But he'd been determined, and she'd been too afraid of losing him to push harder. "I see my mother in you," she said quietly. "The way you shrink yourself, the way you perform happiness. She did that too, for decades. And it killed her, Maya, not cancer. The weight of living a life that wasn't hers." Her words hit me like a physical blow. "I don't want that to be your story," she continued. "You're 21 years old. You have your entire life ahead of you. And I know this isn't what you want." "It doesn't matter what I want," I whispered. "I have no money, no education, nowhere to go. This is my life now." "It doesn't have to be." She reached into her purse and pulled out a card. A business card for a women's shelter and legal aid organization. "I volunteer there," she said. "We help women in situations like yours. We can help you get out, get educated, start over, if that's what you want." I stared at the card like it was a bomb that might explode in my hands. "He'd kill me," I said. "My father would—" "Your father sold you for a business deal," Priya said bluntly. "He doesn't get a say in your life anymore. Not if you don't give him one." It was the first time anyone had said it out loud. Sold. That's what had happened. My father had sold me to his brother for money, for business opportunities, for his own advancement. And I'd let it happen because I'd been taught that I had no other choice. "Think about it," Priya said, squeezing my hand. "But think quickly. The longer you stay, the harder it gets to leave." She left that afternoon. Uncle Vikram never knew about our conversation, but everything had changed. The card stayed hidden in my jewelry box, buried under costume pieces I never wore. But I thought about it constantly. For weeks, I did nothing. The fear was paralyzing. Fear of my father's rage, fear of being disowned, ostracized, becoming a cautionary tale, fear of failing, of ending up on the streets with nothing. But then I started paying attention, really paying attention to my life. I noticed how Uncle Vikram spoke to me, never asking my opinion, just issuing gentle directives. How my father called every week not to ask how I was, but to ensure I was still compliant. How I'd stopped looking at myself in mirrors because I couldn't recognize the person staring back. I was disappearing, erasing myself a little more each day. And I realized I was already dead. The girl I'd been, the woman I could have become. She was gone. This wasn't life. It was existence, performance, slow suicide. If I stayed, I'd become Uncle Vikram's first wife. I'd live decades in quiet misery and then fade away, leaving nothing behind but photographs on walls and a closet full of clothes for the next wife to dispose of. That thought terrified me more than any risk of leaving. So I started planning. Secretly, carefully, I began gathering documents, my birth certificate, my marriage certificate, my identification cards, things Uncle Vikram kept locked in his office but that I learned to access when he was out. I started volunteering at the local temple. It was acceptable, traditional, the pious wife doing charitable work. Uncle Vikram approved. He even bragged about it to his friends. But it gave me freedom. A few hours a week where I wasn't watched, where I could think, plan, and eventually where I could make a phone call. I called the number on Priya's card from a borrowed phone at the temple. A woman named Anjali answered. Her voice was kind but professional. She didn't gasp at my story or tell me how brave I was. She asked practical questions. Did I have any money? No. Did I have documents? Working on it. Was there immediate physical danger? Not physical, but yes, danger. Did I have a place to go? No. We can help with all of that, she said. But you need to be sure. Leaving is dangerous, Maya. Not because you're doing anything wrong, but because controlling people don't let go easily. Your father and husband will fight this. They'll try to manipulate you, threaten you, maybe even try to force you back. You need to be mentally prepared for that. I'm prepared, I said, though I wasn't sure if it was true. Good. Then let's get you out. We planned it for a Thursday. Uncle Vikram had a business meeting in the city, one of those all-day affairs where he wouldn't be home until evening. My father was at work. The house would be empty. The night before, I couldn't sleep. I kept imagining everything that could go wrong. Uncle Vikram canceling his meeting. My father showing up unexpectedly. Someone from the organization backing out. But Thursday morning came, and Uncle Vikram left at 7:30 like clockwork. I waited an hour to be sure he wasn't coming back. Then I started packing. One bag. That's all Anjali had said to bring. One bag with essentials, clothes, documents, anything with sentimental value I couldn't bear to lose. It should have been easy. It should have taken 10 minutes. But I stood in that bedroom for an hour, paralyzed. Leaving meant admitting failure, admitting I couldn't make the marriage work, couldn't be the perfect daughter, couldn't fulfill my duty. Everything I'd been taught my entire life screamed that I was wrong, selfish, ungrateful. I looked at the wedding photos on the dresser, that girl in red and gold decorated and displayed. She looked like a stranger. I didn't want to be her anymore. I packed the bag. Anjali arrived at 10 o'clock in an unmarked car. She was younger than I expected, maybe 30, with kind eyes and an efficiency that was comforting. Ready? She asked. I nodded, though I wasn't sure I'd ever be ready. I left the house keys on the kitchen counter. Didn't leave a note. Anjali advised against it. Just walked out the door with my single bag and got into her car. As we pulled away, I looked back at the house. My prison for 2 years. I didn't feel relief. Not yet, just numbness and terror. Where are we going? I asked. Safe house, Anjali said. It's a temporary shelter for women leaving difficult situations. You'll stay there while we sort out the legal issues. No one will know where you are. Not your father, not your husband, not anyone. How long? As long as you need. We drove for 45 minutes, leaving my small town behind, heading into the city. The safe house was in an ordinary neighborhood, an ordinary building. You'd never know what it was just by looking. Inside there were 6 other women. Different ages, different stories, but the same haunted look in their eyes. The look of people who'd survived something that had tried to break them. A counselor named Mira showed me to a small room, just a bed, a desk, a closet. Basic but clean. Private. "This is yours," she said, "for as long as you need it." I set down my bag and sat on the bed. And then my phone rang. It was Uncle Vikram. I stared at the screen, my hand shaking. Anjali had told me this would happen, that I didn't have to answer, that I could block the number. But some self-destructive part of me needed to hear it, needed to know. I answered. "Where are you?" His voice was eerily calm, too calm. "I left. I can see that. Come home. Now." "No." Silence. Then, "Maya, I don't know what's gotten into you, but this is unacceptable. You're my wife. You belong here." Belong. Like property. Like furniture. "I don't belong to anyone," I said, voice shaking. "I never wanted this marriage. I never wanted any of this." "You're being irrational, emotional. Women get like this sometimes." I hung up. He called back immediately. I didn't answer. Then my father called. Then Uncle Vikram again. Then my brothers. Then aunties, cousins, family, friends. Everyone suddenly very concerned about my well-being. The messages started pouring in. "How dare you shame this family? You're breaking your father's heart. Think about what you're doing. Uncle Vikram has been so good to you. You'll never survive on your own. Come home before it's too late." They ranged from pleading to threatening, from guilt trips to outright intimidation. My father left a voicemail that I listened to once and then deleted. "You ungrateful girl. After everything I've done for you, you'll come crawling back when you realize no one else will have you. And when you do, don't expect forgiveness." I sat on that bed in the safe house and cried, not because I regretted leaving, but because the people who were supposed to love me had only ever loved what I could do for them. Mira found me there an hour later. "They're saying terrible things," I said through tears. "I know," she said gently. "That's what they do. They try to make you feel small, crazy, wrong, because if you believe them, you'll come back. And then they win. What if they're right? What if I can't do this? Then we'll figure it out together. But Maya, you've already done the hardest part. You left. Everything else is just details." The organization connected me with a lawyer, a fierce woman named Kavita who specialized in family law. "I'm not going to lie to you," she said at our first meeting. "This won't be easy. Your husband and father will fight the divorce. They'll try to paint you as unstable, ungrateful, influenced by bad elements. They'll pressure your family to pressure you. It's going to get ugly." "I don't care," I said, and I meant it. "I want out." "Then let's do this." We filed for divorce on the grounds of mental cruelty and coercion. The marriage had been forced. I'd been underage mentally, if not legally, and the age gap was exploitative. Uncle Vikram's response was to hire the most expensive lawyer in the city and deny everything. According to his filing, I was a willing bride who'd had a mental breakdown and was now being manipulated by radical feminists. My father's response was more direct. He showed up at the safe house. I don't know how he found me. Someone must have told him. But he came, pounding on the door, demanding to see me. I watched from the window. He looked smaller than I remembered, older, angrier. "You will regret this," he shouted at the building. "You hear me? You'll regret this for the rest of your miserable life." The safe house director called the police. My father was escorted away, still shouting. I didn't feel victorious. I just felt sad. This man, who I'd once thought was invincible, was now reduced to screaming at a building because his daughter had dared to want her own life. The legal battle dragged on for months. Depositions, hearings. mediation attempts that went nowhere because Uncle Vikram refused to accept that I wasn't coming back. During this time, the organization helped me get enrolled in equivalency classes. I'd never finished high school properly, so I worked toward my diploma. It felt surreal, sitting in a classroom at 21, learning alongside teenagers. But it also felt like resurrection. I was becoming a person again. Not a daughter, not a wife, just Maya. The divorce hearings were brutal. I had to sit across from Uncle Vikram and my father and recount every detail of my misery, every moment of feeling trapped, every night I'd cried myself to sleep. Uncle Vikram's lawyer tried to make me seem like a liar, a gold digger, someone who'd married for money, and was now trying to extort more in a divorce. "Isn't it true that you lived comfortably in my client's home?" the lawyer asked. "Yes," I said, "in a very comfortable cage." "Isn't it true that my client provided for you, never raised a hand to you, treated you with respect?" "He treated me like property. With great care, yes, but property nonetheless." The judge, an older woman with sharp eyes, listened to everything. Then she turned to Uncle Vikram. "Mr. Sharma, this court finds it deeply concerning that a 62-year-old man saw nothing inappropriate about marrying his 19-year-old niece. Regardless of consent, which is questionable given the family pressure, this marriage demonstrates a fundamental power imbalance that cannot be ignored." She granted the divorce, no alimony, as I'd requested. I wanted nothing from him, just my freedom. Uncle Vikram sat there in shock, as if he'd never considered the possibility that he might lose. My father stormed out of the courtroom without looking at me, and I walked out a free woman. Freedom was terrifying. For the first few weeks after the divorce was finalized, I felt untethered, lost. My entire life had been structured by other people's expectations, other people's rules. Now suddenly I could do whatever I wanted, and I had no idea what that was. The organization helped me find a small apartment, tiny, barely furnished, but mine. They connected me with job placement services. I ended up working as a receptionist at a dental office. It wasn't glamorous, but it was honest work. Money I earned, a purpose I chose. I finished my high school equivalency and enrolled in community college. I didn't know what I wanted to study yet. I took a little bit of everything: literature, psychology, mathematics, art. Sampling life like someone who'd been starving and suddenly faced with a buffet. It was overwhelming and exhilarating and exhausting all at once. I made friends, real friends, not relatives or people my husband approved of. Women from my classes, colleagues from work, other survivors from the support groups I attended. Priya reached out a few months after the divorce. She apologized again for not doing more sooner. We started meeting for coffee every few weeks. She became something like an older sister, the family I chose instead of the family I was born into. Slowly, painstakingly, I built a life. But I wasn't done. There was still one more thing I needed to do. 3 years after I left, I went back home. Not to my father's house. I'd never stepped foot in there again, but to the town, to the community that had watched me be sold and said nothing. I'd been invited to speak at a local women's organization, one that was trying to combat forced marriages and domestic abuse. The invitation had come through the organization that had saved me, and I'd almost said no. Facing those people, those aunties who'd smiled at my wedding and whispered pity behind closed doors, it felt like volunteering for my own execution. But I also realized they needed to hear it. Not for me. For every other girl in that community who was being groomed for the same fate. The event was held at the community center. As I walked in, I saw familiar faces, women I'd grown up around, women who'd known me since I was a child. Some looked away, some looked curious, some looked hostile. I took the stage, my hands shaking, and began to speak. I told my story, not dramatically, not angrily, just honestly. I talked about being 19 and having my future stolen, about being married to a man old enough to be my grandfather, about the loneliness, the fear, the slow death of self. I talked about my father. I didn't name him, but everyone knew who I meant, and how he'd prioritized money over his daughter's well-being. And I talked about escape, about the organizations that help women leave, about the legal rights they have, about the fact that tradition is not more important than consent. When I finished, the room was silent. Then one woman stood up, then another, then another. Some were crying, some were nodding, and a few young girls in the back, teenagers, maybe 17 or 18, were staring at me like I just told them something revolutionary, that girls have rights, that they can say no, that they don't have to accept the future their fathers choose for them. After the talk, several women approached me privately. They told me their own stories. Daughters married too young, granddaughters being groomed for inappropriate matches, friends who disappeared into abusive marriages and were never heard from again. "Can you help?" one woman asked, pressing a piece of paper with her daughter's name into my hand. "She's only 16, and her father is already arranging—" "Yes," I said. "I can help." That night, I sat in my hotel room and thought about my father. He lived 15 minutes away. Part of me wanted to confront him, to ask him how he could have done it, to make him apologize. But I realized I didn't need his apology, his regret, his acknowledgement. I didn't need anything from him anymore. He'd lost a daughter, I'd gained a life. That was all the justice I needed. I'm 23 now. 4 years since I left that house. 4 years since I chose myself over my family's expectations. Life isn't perfect. I'm still in school. It turns out studying psychology while working full-time is harder than I expected, but I'm managing. I'm still in therapy, working through the trauma, the conditioning, the years of being told I was worthless outside of my utility to men. Some days are harder than others. Some days I still hear my father's voice in my head, telling me I'm selfish, ungrateful, wrong. But then I look around at the life I've built, the apartment with books I chose on shelves I arranged, the degree I'm working toward in a field I selected, the friends who love me for who I am, not for what I can provide them, the freedom to make mistakes, to fail, to succeed, all on my own terms. I volunteer now with the organization that saved me. I help other women plan their escapes, navigate legal systems, rebuild their lives. I sit across from girls who are 19, 20, 21, the same age I was, and I tell them, "You are not property. You are not a bargaining chip. You deserve to choose your own life." Sometimes they listen, sometimes they're not ready yet. I understand that too. Leaving is complicated. Fear is paralyzing. The devil you know feels safer than the freedom you don't. But I plant the seed. I let them know there's a way out, if they want it. My father and I haven't spoken since the courthouse. He sends messages occasionally through distant relatives. Always demands, never apologies. Come home. Ask for forgiveness. Stop shaming the family. I delete them without reading past the first line. My brothers have reached out a few times, awkward phone calls where they don't quite apologize, but also don't quite take responsibility. "We didn't know it was that bad," Rahul said once. "You didn't want to know," I corrected him. "There's a difference." Uncle Vikram remarried last year, a woman his own age this time, a widow from his retirement community. I heard about it through Priya, who attended the wedding out of obligation. "He seemed happy," she told me, "but he also seemed smaller, older, like he knew he'd done something wrong but would never admit it." Good, I thought. Let him live with that. People sometimes ask if I regret it, if I miss my family, my old life, the comfort and security I gave up. And I always tell them the same thing. I don't miss the cage, even if it was gilded. I don't miss the performance of happiness while dying inside. I don't miss being owned. Yes, my life is harder now. Yes, I struggle financially sometimes. Yes, there are moments when I feel alone in a way I never did when surrounded by family. But I'm alone on my own terms, struggling toward goals I chose, building a life I actually want to live. That's worth everything I lost. If there's anything I want people to take away from my story, it's this. Forced marriage isn't always violent. It isn't always kidnapping and threats. Sometimes it's gentle pressure. Sometimes it's framed as love, as protection, as tradition. Sometimes it's your own father telling you he knows what's best for you. But coercion is coercion, no matter how gently it's applied. And you, if you're reading this, if you're living this, you deserve better. You deserve to choose. You deserve to exist as more than a daughter, a wife, a mother. You deserve to be a person in your own right. Leaving is hard. Leaving is terrifying. You'll lose people. You'll lose security. You'll lose the comfort of familiarity. But you'll gain yourself. And in the end, that's the only thing you truly need. To every girl being groomed for an inappropriate match, you can say, no, you have rights. There are organizations that will help you. To every woman trapped in a marriage she never wanted, it's not too late. You're not too old. You're not too damaged. You can start over. To every father who thinks his daughter's happiness is worth less than his business deal, you're wrong. And someday, when you're old and alone and wondering why your children don't visit, remember that you chose money over love. You made that choice. To every community that watches forced marriages happen and says nothing, your silence is complicity. Your tradition is trauma. And every girl you fail to protect is on your conscience. And to myself, the 19-year-old girl who thought she had no options, we made it. We got out. We built a life worth living. I'm proud of us. I stood in that courthouse hallway 4 years ago, shaking but free. Today, I stand in my own apartment, looking at my college acceptance letters, my job offer from a domestic violence prevention organization. My life spread out before me like a map I get to draw myself. My name is Maya. I'm 23 years old, and I'm not anyone's property anymore. I'm not anyone's bargaining chip, anyone's honor, anyone's shame. I'm just me. And that's enough. That's more than enough. That's everything. I was in the middle of grading papers when my phone rang. A number I didn't recognize. I almost didn't answer. But something made me pick up. Is this Maya? A woman's voice, shaking, young. Yes. Who is this? My name is Zara. I got your number from the Women's Center. They said you help people. People like me. I set down my pen, giving her my full attention. I knew that tremor in her voice. I'd had it once too. I'm listening. I'm 17. My father wants me to marry my cousin. He's 34. The engagement is next month and Her voice broke. I don't know what to do. I closed my eyes, transported back to my own 19-year-old self, that feeling of walls closing in, of having no escape. Are you safe right now? Is anyone listening? I'm at school, in the bathroom. I have 10 minutes before class. Okay, listen to me carefully. You have options. You have rights. And you are not alone. Can you meet me tomorrow? Yes, I can. I gave her the address of a cafe, neutral territory, somewhere public and safe. After hanging up, I sat there for a moment, my hands trembling slightly. Even now, 5 years later, these stories still affected me. Because they were my story. Different details, same cage. I'd helped 32 women escape forced marriages in the past 3 years. 32 lives redirected. But each one took something from me, too. Each one reminded me of how close I'd come to never getting out. Zara showed up the next day, looking exactly how I expected. Eyes darting around nervously, dressed conservatively, the weight of the world on shoulders too young to carry it. I bought her tea and sat across from her, waiting for her to find her words. They say you left, she finally said. Your own arranged marriage. To your uncle? I did. How? The word came out desperate. Everyone says it's impossible. The girls who leave end up... She couldn't finish the sentence. End up what? Dead, on the streets, alone forever. I leaned forward. Those are lies they tell us to keep us trapped. I won't say it's easy, but it's possible, and more importantly, it's worth it. For the next 2 hours, I told her everything, the planning, the resources, the legal process, the organizations that would help, the safe houses, the path forward. But I also told her the hard truth. Your father will be angry. Your family will ostracize you. People will say terrible things. You'll lose the life you know. But I'll have myself, she said quietly, echoing words I'd once said. Yes, you'll have yourself, she cried. I let her. Sometimes crying is the first act of rebellion, allowing yourself to feel what you've been told you shouldn't feel. When she composed herself, she looked at me with something like hope. Will you help me? Every step of the way. By 25, I'd graduated with my bachelor's degree in social work. It had taken longer than traditional students. I'd worked full-time while studying, taken semesters off when money was tight, pushed through when exhaustion made me want to quit. But I'd done it. The degree was mine, earned, not given, and that made it sweeter. I'd also started speaking publicly more often. Universities invited me to talk about forced marriage. News outlets interviewed me about women's rights. I'd even testified before a government committee examining reforms to marriage laws. It was surreal, being the face of something I'd once been too ashamed to talk about. But the most important work happened in quiet rooms with scared girls and broken women. That's where real change occurred. One life at a time. The organization that had saved me offered me a full-time position as a case manager. It didn't pay much, but money had never been the point. I helped women escape. I helped them find housing. I connected them with lawyers, therapists, job training programs. I became the person I'd needed when I was 19. One evening, I was leaving the office when I ran into Anjali, the woman who'd driven me away from Uncle Vikram's house 5 years earlier. "Maya," she said, smiling, "look at you, all grown up." I learned from the best. We went for coffee, catching up on each other's lives. She'd gotten married recently to a man she'd chosen herself. She showed me photos, beaming with genuine happiness. "You ever think about dating?" she asked gently. I stiffened. "I'm fine on my own." "I know you are, but fine isn't the same as happy. You deserve love, Maya. Real love, the kind you choose." The truth was, I'd avoided romance entirely. The thought of letting someone that close, of being vulnerable, of risking that kind of control over my life again. It terrified me. I'd convinced myself I was better off alone. But Anjali's words lingered. His name was Arjun. I met him in the most mundane way possible. The grocery store. I was reaching for coffee on a high shelf when he appeared beside me, tall enough to grab it easily. "This one?" he asked, holding it out. "Yes, thank you," he smiled. "I've seen you here before. Every Saturday, 10 a.m., same aisle, very predictable." I should have been alarmed. But there was something disarming about his directness. No pretense, no game. "I like routine," I said. "Me too. I'm Arjun, by the way. And before you worry, I'm not a stalker. I'm just a creature of habit who happens to also grocery shop on Saturday mornings." Despite myself, I laughed. "Maya." We talked for 20 minutes in that coffee aisle. He was a high school teacher, literature, never married, no kids, loved reading, hiking, cooking, normal, safe. When he asked for my number, I almost said no. But something in me, maybe the part that was learning to be brave in new ways, said yes. Our first date was at a bookstore cafe, neutral territory, public, easy to leave if needed. Arjun was patient. He didn't push, didn't ask intrusive questions about why I was so guarded, why I flinched when he moved too quickly, why I insisted on separate checks and separate transportation. On our third date, I told him about my past. Not everything, but enough. The forced marriage, the escape, the years of rebuilding. He listened without interrupting. And when I finished, he said simply, "Thank you for trusting me with that." Not, "I'm sorry." Not, "You're so brave." Just acknowledgement that I'd chosen to share something difficult. That's when I knew he might be different. Dating Arjun was like learning a new language. I'd only known love as obligation, as performance, as transaction. The idea that love could be soft, equal, freely given, it was foreign to me. He never demanded anything, never made me feel owned. If I needed space, he gave it without complaint. If I had a bad day and couldn't see him, he understood. "I'm not going anywhere," he'd say. "Take the time you need." 6 months in, he invited me to meet his parents. I panicked. "I can't," I said, my breath coming short. What if they're like, "They're not," Arjun said gently, taking my hand. "They're kind people who want to meet the woman I care about. But if you're not ready, that's okay too. We go at your pace." I met them the following week. His mother was warm and talkative, his father quiet but kind. They asked about my work, my studies, my interests, not about my family, not about marriage. Not about why a 25-year-old woman was divorced. At dinner, his mother said something that made me cry. "Arjun tells us you help women escape difficult situations. That's remarkable work. You must be very brave." She saw me as a person, not as damaged goods, not as someone's former wife. as a person doing meaningful work. I excused myself to the bathroom and cried for 10 minutes. When I came back, Arjun's father had cleared the table and his mother was making tea. They pretended not to notice my red eyes, just welcomed me back with gentle smiles. This, I realized, was what family could be, should be. A year into our relationship, Arjun proposed. We were hiking, watching the sunset from a cliff overlooking the valley. He didn't kneel, didn't make a spectacle, just turned to me and said, "I love you. I want to build a life with you. Will you marry me?" I should have been happy, should have said yes immediately. Instead, I had a panic attack. My chest tightened. I couldn't breathe. The cliff seemed to spin around me. All I could think was, not again, not again, not again. Arjun guided me to sit down, his hand on my back, talking me through breathing exercises until the panic subsided. "I'm sorry," I gasped. "I'm so sorry. It's okay," he said quietly. "I should have anticipated this. Maya, look at me." I met his eyes. "This is nothing like last time. You have all the power here. You can say no and I'll still love you. You can say yes and we'll do it your way. Court marriage, no ceremony, whatever makes you comfortable. You can say, ask me again in a year and I'll wait. This is your choice, only yours." I started crying. "I want to say yes. I want to marry you, but I'm terrified." Of me? Of losing myself again. He was quiet for a moment then. "What if we made promises to each other right now? No rings, no ceremony, just promises." "What kind of promises?" "I promise to never make decisions for you, to respect your autonomy always, to love you as an equal partner, not as property, to support your dreams even when they're inconvenient for me, to be honest when I'm wrong, to go to therapy with you when things get hard." He paused. "Your turn." I took a shaky breath. "I promise to work on my fear, to trust you until you give me reason not to communicate instead of running, to believe that love doesn't have to be a cage, to build a marriage that looks nothing like the one I left." We sat there as the sun set, holding hands, making promises more meaningful than any legal document. I said yes, but on my terms, in my time. We got married 6 months later. Court ceremony, just us and 2 witnesses. I wore purple instead of red. Arjun wore whatever he wanted. We wrote our own vows. And when the judge declared us married, I didn't feel trapped. I felt chosen and choosing. We'd been married for 8 months when I saw him. Arjun and I were at a restaurant celebrating my promotion to program director. I was mid-sentence, laughing at something he'd said, when I glanced toward the entrance. Uncle Vikram stood there with his wife, waiting to be seated. The room tilted, my throat closed. 8 years had passed, but suddenly I was 19 again, trapped in his house, feeling his hand on my knee. "Maya?" Arjun's voice seemed far away. "Maya, what's wrong?" I couldn't speak, couldn't move. Uncle Vikram hadn't seen me yet. He was talking to the hostess, oblivious. Arjun followed my gaze and understood immediately. We talked about my past many times. He knew exactly who Uncle Vikram was. "Do you want to leave?" he asked quietly. Did I? Part of me wanted to run, to hide, to never let that man see me again. But another part, the part that had spent 8 years rebuilding, healing, becoming strong, wanted to stay. "No," I said, finding my voice. "I'm staying." "You're sure?" "I'm sure." Uncle Vikram finally saw me. I watched the recognition cross his face. Shock, discomfort, something that might have been shame, but probably wasn't. He said something to his wife and started walking toward our table. "Maya," he said, his voice uncertain. I didn't expect to see you." "Clearly." Awkward silence. His wife hovered behind him, confused. "You look well," he said finally. "I am well. This is my husband, Arjun." Arjun stood, extending his hand. Uncle Vikram shook it automatically, clearly thrown by the normalcy of the gesture. "Your husband?" Uncle Vikram said. "Yes, we've been married for 8 months. I have a master's degree now, and I run a women's advocacy program. I help women escape forced marriages." I let that sink in. "I'm very happy." I watched him process this. The fact that I'd moved on, that I'd built a life without him, that I'd succeeded despite, or perhaps because of leaving him. That's good, he said, though he looked pained. Maya, I've thought about what happened. Don't, I said, not unkindly. Whatever you're about to say, don't. It won't change anything. I've moved on. You should too. His wife touched his arm gently. Vikram, our table is ready. He nodded, looking old and tired. I'm glad you're happy, Maya, truly. I believe you, I said. And surprisingly, I did. But that doesn't change what you did. What you both did, I added, thinking of my father. You took advantage of a girl who had no power to say no. You may not have meant to hurt me, but you did, and I needed you to know that I survived despite you, not because of you. He opened his mouth, closed it, then nodded and walked away. Arjun sat back down, watching me carefully. How do you feel? I considered the question. Free, I said finally. I feel free. He doesn't scare me anymore. He's just a man who made terrible choices, and I'm the woman who refused to let those choices define her. We finished our dinner, and I didn't look back at his table once. 3 years after that restaurant encounter, my phone rang at 2 a.m. It was Rahul, my brother. We'd maintained minimal contact over the years, polite but distant. He respected my boundaries. Amit had never called. Maya, he said, his voice thick. It's father. He's had a heart attack. He's asking for you. My first instinct was to hang up. My second was to say no. But Arjun, woken by the phone, whispered, Whatever you decide, I support you. Is he dying? I asked Rahul. They don't know, but he's asking for all of us. He wants to. He says he needs to talk to you. I thought about it for a long moment. Thought about the girl I'd been, the woman I'd become, the closure I'd never gotten. I'll come, I said. But I'm bringing my husband, and I'm leaving when I want to leave. Of course. Thank you, Maya. The hospital was an hour away. Arjun drove while I sat in silence, processing. I hadn't seen my father in nearly a decade. Part of me wondered if I'd feel something when I saw him. Anger, grief, longing. I felt nothing, just a strange numbness. He looked small in the hospital bed, old, fragile. Not the towering figure who'd controlled my childhood, just a sick old man who'd made terrible choices. Rahul and Amit were already there with their families. They looked uncomfortable when I walked in with Arjun. My father's eyes found mine. Maya, he rasped. You came. I'm here. What did you want to say? He struggled to sit up. A nurse adjusted his pillows. I've been thinking, he began, about my life, my choices. And I realized I was wrong about you, about the marriage. I was wrong. I waited. I thought I was doing what was best. For the family, for everyone. But I see now that I hurt you. Badly. And I'm sorry. The apology I'd once craved. The words I'd dreamed of hearing. And all I felt was tired. Thank you for saying that, I said evenly. But Father, I need you to understand something. I don't forgive you. He looked stricken. I don't forgive you, I repeated. Because forgiveness would imply that we're okay now, that we can have a relationship, and we can't. You sold me. You chose money over my well-being. You chose your reputation over my happiness, and no apology can undo that. Maya, I'm not saying this to hurt you. I'm saying it because it's the truth. You made your choices, and I made mine. I survived despite you. I built a life despite you, and that life doesn't include you. Tears ran down his wrinkled face. I don't want to die with this between us. Then you should have thought about that before you forced me to marry your brother? My voice was calm, clinical. You're dying with the consequences of your choices, just like I had to live with the consequences of them. I turned to leave, then stopped. But for what it's worth, I don't hate you. I did, for a long time. But hate is exhausting. Now I just... Nothing you. You're a chapter of my life that's closed, and I'm okay with that. I walked out. Arjun followed me to the car. I didn't cry, didn't feel relieved or vindicated, just done. Do you want to go back? He asked gently. No. I said what I needed to say. Whether he lives or dies, I have peace. Not forgiveness, but peace. My father died 3 days later. Rahul called to tell me. I thanked him for letting me know and declined to attend the funeral. I'd mourned the loss of my father years ago. This was just paperwork. I'm 30 years old now. I run the women's advocacy program that saved me 12 years ago. Anjali retired last year, passing the directorship to me. I've helped over 100 women escape forced marriages. Some succeed, some go back, some take years to finally leave. I don't judge. I just keep the door open. Arjun and I are talking about adoption. We both agree that bringing children into the world is a responsibility we take seriously. We want to give a home to kids who need one, kids who, like me, need someone to choose them. Priya is still in my life, more like an aunt now than a friend. Her kids call me Auntie Maya and have no idea about the history between our families. Zara, the 17-year-old who called me 5 years ago, successfully escaped her forced engagement. She's in university now, studying law. She wants to be a family court judge. Because of you, she told me recently. Because of you, I corrected. I just opened the door. You walked through it. I still do speaking engagements. Last month, I was invited back to my hometown, the place I'd fled from, to speak at a school. Standing in that auditorium, looking at rows of teenage girls, I thought about my 19-year-old self. How trapped she felt. How hopeless. You are not your family's honor, I told them. You are not bargaining chips. You are not property. You are human beings with rights, dreams, and autonomy. And anyone who tells you otherwise is wrong. I don't care if it's your father, your community, your tradition. They are wrong. One girl raised her hand. But what if leaving means losing everything? It might, I said honestly. It might mean losing your family, your community, your safety net. It might mean starting over with nothing. And that's terrifying. I paused. But let me ask you this. What's the cost of staying? What's the price of living a life that isn't yours? Of waking up every day as someone's possession rather than your own person? That sounds lonely, another girl said softly. It can be, I admitted. But there's a difference between being alone and being lonely. I was lonelier in my forced marriage, surrounded by people, than I've ever been while living independently. Because loneliness isn't about physical isolation. It's about not being seen, not being heard, not being valued. After the talk, a line of girls formed. Some wanted advice, some wanted resources, some just wanted to tell someone their story. I stayed for 3 hours, listening to each one, because someone listened to me once, and it saved my life. If I could go back and tell my 19-year-old self anything, it would be this. It gets better. Not immediately, not easily. But eventually the weight lifts. Eventually you remember how to breathe without that constant pressure on your chest. Eventually you wake up and realize you're not just surviving anymore. You're living. I tell her that she's stronger than she knows, that the courage it takes to leave is the same courage that will carry her through everything that comes after. I tell her that she'll fall in love again. Real love. The kind that makes her feel expansive rather than small. The kind that celebrates her autonomy rather than trying to control it. I tell her that she'll help others, that her pain won't be wasted, that she'll transform it into something meaningful. And I tell her that forgiveness isn't mandatory, that she doesn't owe it to her father, her former husband, or anyone else. That choosing peace over forgiveness is valid, that she can move on without absolution. Most importantly, I tell her, you are enough. You were always enough. You didn't fail at that marriage. That marriage was a failure. You didn't disappoint your family. They disappointed you. You didn't shame anyone. You saved yourself. And saving yourself is never shameful. Today is a good day. I'm sitting in my office, sunlight streaming through the window. My degrees hang on the wall, bachelor's, master's, proof of every late night, every sacrifice, every moment I wanted to quit but didn't. There's a photo on my desk. Arjun and me on our anniversary laughing at something ridiculous. Real laughter, the kind that comes from genuine joy. Next to it, a card from Zara, now a second-year law student. Thank you for showing me that escape is possible. I'm going to help other girls do the same. The phone rings. Another young woman in crisis. Another chance to pass on the lifeline I was once thrown. This is Maya, I answer. How can I help you? And as I listen to her story, so similar to mine, yet uniquely hers, I think about the girl I was, the woman I've become, the journey between those two versions of myself. It wasn't easy, it wasn't pretty. There were moments I wanted to give up, to go back, to accept that maybe everyone was right and I was wrong, but I didn't. And now I'm here, 30 years old, free, whole, happy. Not despite my past, but because I refuse to let it define me. I help this woman on the phone make a plan. I give her hope. I promise her she's not alone, because she isn't. None of us are. We're a sisterhood of survivors, of fighters, of women who chose themselves when everyone else tried to choose for them. My name is Maya. I was forced to marry my uncle at 19. I escaped at 21. I rebuilt my life piece by piece, and now I help others do the same. This is my story. But more importantly, it's a roadmap. Proof that escape is possible, that healing is real, that life after trauma isn't just survivable, it can be beautiful. You're not trapped. You never were. The cage has a door. You just need to be brave enough to open it. I was. And you can be too.